As the military coalition aligned against Saddam Hussein's forces launched airstrikes to begin the first Gulf War, Iraq responded with a sequence of SCUD missile attacks on Israel. While they achieved little in military terms, the old and inaccurate missiles provoked a political crisis and panic in Israel. The country was eager to retaliate against Hussein. Still, such an action would have caused an irreparable rift between the US and the Arab countries coalesced in support of the American cause against Hussein. Instead, the US redirected coalition military aircraft from their assigned targets to hunt for the SCUDs, destroying most of Iraq's static missile installations. The Iraqis complicated the mission, however, by hiding mobile missiles in the vast desert. They proved nearly impossible to locate from the air. Israel, still enraged by the attacks, had to be placated by assurances that a special operations force sent by the US was on the hunt for the remaining missiles. Delta Force was on the job. A secret team was deployed to the region, while the United Kingdom provided additional special air service squadrons to seek out and destroy the SCUDs, the launchers, and the manufacturing plants. A political challenge. The challenge created by the SCUD crisis was an unexpected obstacle faced by the Gulf War coalition leaders beginning in late January 1991. Saddam Hussein successfully deployed the missiles from mobile launchers, with attacks starting on January 18th. A series of SCUDs were fired against Israel, Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain. While the weapons were unreliable and inaccurate, ensuring little in terms of military threat or as an effective counter-force weapon, they were still a threat in terms of political strategy. Hussein was aiming to break the fragile coalition formed by the US to combat the dictator. By striking Israel, Hussein was attempting to position himself in the Arab world as a leader against a common Arab enemy. The United States feared that a rash Israeli response would shift the anti-Iraq Arab coalition in favor of Hussein. Israel's military policy dictated that any attack on its territory should be responded to with force, putting the US's delicate plans in grave danger. 26 missiles struck Israel during the first week of attacks. They destroyed little, but they caused panic and psychological distress, as well as a desire for retribution. Any response would require Israel entering neighboring Arab airspace. Under such circumstances, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and perhaps even Jordan would have likely withdrawn and undercut the main political and diplomatic strength of the effort formed against Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. The Iraqi attacks on Saudi Arabia and Bahrain did not carry the same political implications. However, the US feared those strikes would goad those countries into pushing for a premature attack in retaliation. As things were, the US was already walking a diplomatic tightrope to prevent Israel's involvement in the conflict. To temporarily satisfy the Israelis, payment for their non-participation was provided in the form of 2 US Army Patriot air defense batteries. America also promised an intense and sustained air campaign to wipe out the SCUDs before any more could be launched. Still, the difficulty of locating and eliminating the mobile units led to the more dramatic assembly and deployment of Special Forces units. The missile threat. When the invasion of Kuwait began, Iraq was in possession of 2 different versions of the SCUD missiles. The first one, labeled the Al-Hussein, had a range between 600 and 650 kilometers. The other was labeled Al-Abbas, with a range of between 750 and 900 kilometers. Both were built from modified Soviet R-17 ballistic missiles. The Iraqi modifications included reducing the in-flight weight and a faster burn rate for the fuel, resulting in greater range but less accurate targeting than the original. Due to these modifications, the SCUDs were not truly useful as targeted missiles. Still, they could fulfill their intended purpose of causing panic and terror. The launches followed a tactic from the 1980s Iran versus Iraq war, during which Baghdad fired 203 of these missiles against Iranian targets. While causing little destruction, they did incite fear that they might be packed with chemical weapons and played a strong psychological role in that first conflict. By the start of the Persian Gulf War, Iraq had 2 methods of firing the missiles. The first were fixed launchers across stationary facilities. The second, which turned out to be far more useful, was the TEL, or Transporter Erector Launchers, a mobile system. U.S. military experts estimated that Hussein counted on 28 fixed facilities at the beginning of the conflict, all in western Iraq, with an additional few training launchers found elsewhere. Furthermore, they knew the Iraqis had 2 types of mobile launchers: the MAZ-543, a Soviet model on 8 wheels, and a modified civilian tractor called Al-Walid. The armed forces in Iraq did everything in their power to ensure that the enemies were unable to identify their exact number of TELs or their precise locations. They used almost identical decoys, many from East Germany, to distract their adversaries. The missile crews also used tactics and procedures designed to limit the aerial reconnaissance capabilities of the US and its allies, such as hiding in wadis, culverts, gullies, and underpasses. Furthermore, they were able to operate from unexpected positions, including reinforced shelters located in airbases and makeshift firing areas. Iraq assembled hidden holding pens thanks to their experience fighting Iran, which now allowed the SCUDs to launch faster. While Soviet soldiers would usually spend about 90 minutes setting up and launching a missile of the same type, the Arab nation had managed to cut down the launch time to less than 30 minutes. They got rid of any emitting telemetry that could alert their enemies to the location of their missiles before, during, and after launching it. Supported by these deceptions, the Iraqis were able to consistently hide the full extent of their inventory and its multiple locations. The TELs were, therefore, highly effective in this regard. At the start of the war, the US believed it had a good understanding of Iraq's SCUD capabilities. In reality, they were only fully aware of the fixed sites. Analysts did feel a bit uneasy about their mobile launchers, but dismissed their numbers. Preemptive movements. Since the beginning of the Gulf War, the military planners from the coalition had been aware of Iraq's ballistic missile threat. In January 1990, their reconnaissance missions located the manufacturing facilities for many missiles and were subsequently targeted. Most of the hits took place overnight between January 16th and 17th. Unfortunately, the easy targets were actually decoys intended to hide the actual mobile launchers that were already hidden and dispersed throughout the country. Adverse weather conditions also played a role in aiding the Iraqi deception. In response, the coalition tasked with taking out the SCUDs started combat air controls nicknamed kill boxes that targeted suspected locations in western Iraq near the Jordanian border and southern Iraq near Saudi Arabia. The air commanders were expecting the kill boxes to permit F-15 and F-16 airstrikes to destroy the mobile launchers after they had launched the weapons, but before they were moved to safer locations. Yet the sensors on the orbiting coalition planes were incapable of identifying the launchers because their infrared and radar signatures were identical to those of other trucks and other vehicles in the desert. The mobile sites remained elusive. Delta Force. As part of the special operations to finally eliminate the remaining SCUD missiles in Iraq, the US assembled a Delta Force team that was airlifted into the areas of operation by MH-60 and MH-47 helicopters from the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. They were also airlifted by MH-53J Pavelo 3s from the Air Force Special Operations Command. Ground units were transported by modified Humvees escorted by fast attack vehicles and motorcycles. Several British Special Air Service troops entered Iraq in Land Rover columns from the border with Saudi Arabia. As the special units entered Iraq, they began setting up hidden observation posts along the suspected routes believed to be supplying the mobile launchers. If they discovered any potential targets, coalition strike planes would be called to proceed with airstrikes. In order for the aircraft to identify the correct targets, these were pointed to with handheld laser designators. The British units targeted organizational and administrative infrastructure tied to the use of SCUDs. Since the mobile launchers used a fiber optic cable network to contact Central Command when carrying out a mission, the soldiers would destroy any and all cables of the type with explosives upon discovery. The British also undertook raids of communications stations, such as an assault on Victor II, a communications center. Most missions were successful, but a number encountered difficulties. Bravo 20, a foot patrol team of 8 Special Air Service troops, was compromised after being sighted by civilians. An infamous but hazy account of the ordeal described a haphazard escape where only one of the SAS troopers made it out without being lost or captured. A Delta Force unit also encountered trouble after entering the desert by parachute from a U.S. Air Force C-141B Starlifter plane. The team set up an observation point and soon identified a suspicious SCUD convoy. They called in airstrikes by both American and British aircraft, but they were spotted and attacked by a group of Iraqi soldiers. A quick exchange of fire resulted in an injured Delta team member. Since no helicopters were available to recover the soldiers at the time, a surface-to-air recovery of the wounded soldier was executed with the Fulton recovery system. The rest of the troops were later retrieved by an MH-60. Results. Immediately after the end of the war, both the US and the UK declared that the SCUD threat had been neutralized thanks to the secret efforts on the ground. Special Operations Forces leaders claimed that the American teams had taken out at least 2 Transporter-Erector launchers. Yet this triumphant perspective did not last forever. Just 1 year after the war ended, the Pentagon began to backtrack on its initial claims. Some officials shared with the public that they were unsure about how many and what percentage of the SCUD mobile launchers had been eliminated. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs Pete Williams expressed that he had, quote, no accurate count of how many mobile launchers had been destroyed. Furthermore, the post-war study published by the Pentagon under the title The Gulf War Air Power Survey stated, quote, few may have been destroyed, but nowhere near the numbers reported during the war. The report continued, there is no indisputable proof that SCUD mobile launchers, as opposed to high-fidelity decoys, trucks, or other objects with SCUD-like signatures, were destroyed by fixed-wing aircraft.